Mexican Week was not an accident for the Great British Baking Show. After 12 years, the show's long, inexorable journey from comfort to cringe is complete. Remember Custardgate? Deborah and Howard each cooked a custard and put it in the fridge to chill. But then, when Deborah was layering her trifle, she grabbed Howard's custard by mistake. Well, this left Howard no choice but to use Deborah's custard in his trifle. I couldn't forget the whole frivolous affair if I wanted to, and I don't. In its early days, the pleasure of the Great British Baking Show was in the reassuring fantasy it built under a high-pitched country tent, an endless source of cheeky innuendo, serious amateur baking and absolutely nothing else. The worst thing imaginable was that someone's Battenberg cake would come out a bit asymmetrical, or that one baker might accidentally use another baker's custard. Sue Perkins, then a host, described Custardgate as either a mistake or the most incredible case of baking espionage, not because of actual drama or suspicion, but because problems on the show tended toward the truly wholesome and amusing. Taking them too seriously was a sport. From the start, the Great British Bake Off, as it's known in Britain, seemed completely unlike the chef-driven, adrenaline-fueled, corporate-branded American competition shows that dominated at the time, where contestants casually announced their intention to win, not to make friends. It promised to disrupt the genre. But over its 12 years on the air, the worst thing imaginable on Bake Off has gotten worse, again and again. Last week, the hosts, Noel Fielding and Matt Lucas, strolled up a grassy slope dressed in fringed serapes and straw sombreros to introduce Mexican Week with tired puns, saying they shouldn't make Mexican jokes, but proceeding to do just that. The show had hit rock bottom, revealing what it had managed to obscure in the past with a bit of charm. To British audiences, Mr. Lucas and Mr. Fielding appearing in a casually racist bit might not have come as a surprise, but American audiences aren't as familiar with their previous work. In part, that's because The Mighty Boosh and Little Britain, their shows which aired in the early 2000s in Britain, were both pulled by Netflix a few years ago over their performances in blackface, brownface and yellowface. The Bake Off clips were shared incredulously and angrily on Twitter, days before the episode even aired. The phrase, Mexican Week, quickly became shorthand for profound culinary blunder, presented with a sense of naive triumph. An image of a cursed avocado, lopped away with a knife, became the episode's unofficial mascot, as if a home cook unfamiliar with peeling an avocado should feel humiliated. To me, it felt more like the episode had betrayed its own contestants, as well as its audience, with a lack of expertise among judges, and a lack of curiosity among hosts. Paul Hollywood explaining steak tacos with pico de gallo and refried beans to Prue Leith would be howlingly funny, if he weren't positioned as an expert. It was even worse than the clips implied, an hour of incompetent exposition, farcical bumbling and maracas shaking. A distraction for an increasingly insular, self-referential show that's run out of energy in expertise, and refuses to find it elsewhere. The show has slowly moved away from regional specialties and technique-centered challenges, from focusing on, say, the beauty of lamination, hot water crusts and steamed puddings. It has grown to fit the exact, most cliched limits of its form, countries as themes, cuisines as costumes, identities as performances. Sue Perkins and Mel G. Droik, the show's original hosts, excelled at double entendres, while playing up their lack of baking expertise. But they glowed with curiosity and enthusiasm for baking, and short documentary segments they hosted often featured experts and cultural context for many foods on the show. But in more recent seasons, several challenges have presented foods as if encountering them for the first time. A recent, and almost equally chaotic, Japanese week introduced a challenge of Chinese steamed buns. As the show found a wider audience in the United States, and moved from the BBC to Channel 4, it lost Ms. Perkins, Ms. G. Droik and Mary Berry, a judge who was replaced by Ms. Leith. And while it's tempting to say the show hasn't been the same since, you might also say its worst tendencies have simply flourished. Viewers have been pointing them out for years. In an old episode, Mr. Hollywood repeatedly and inexplicably referred to challah, a traditional Jewish bread, as plated bread, which prompted the forward headline, Great British Bake Off has zero Jewish friends. And in 2019, Sanaa Noor Haq wrote about the tension between the show's image as a bastion of modern, multicultural Britain and the judge's clear sense of discomfort, or smirking amusement, when contestants like Michael Chakravorty infused the flavors of coconut and chili into his Carolan Star bread. Contestants were expected to perform their biographies, neatly and concisely, for the judges. To make the flavors and designs of their foods add up to a pleasant and consumable identity. Never mind that some bakers managed to have fun with it, or be really good at it. It was always an impossible task. If they failed, they failed. If they succeeded, they were exotic. And either way, two comedians in serapes and sombreros would come ambling up the hill behind them, insisting they weren't going to make any jokes.